and we'll get started. So hello, everyone. If you joined us yesterday, thank you very much for your time and making the time again available today. I've unmuted Andrew, one of our technical support people, product experts, who's joining us again today. My name is Rob Johnston. If you're joining us first time today, I'm the Director of New Business at Planitar, with a specific focus on commercial real estate and the construction restoration business. This is a webinar series that we're running this week, Monday to Friday, from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every day. You all obviously found the link and had no problems registering. And yesterday we talked about kind of the first step in the process, which was survey. So I'm just going to go back to the beginning of my presentation here and share my screen or go to presentation mode and just kind of go through a real quick high-level summary of what we went through and some other things that way. I think I can close the chat. Okay. So yesterday we talked about, there are 5 things we're going to go through this week: survey, stitch, economics, iGUIDE creation, and iGUIDE management. And I'm just going to jump ahead to day 2 here. So these were all the things we went through yesterday. And here we are at stitch day 2. So a real quick summary about survey is it is the web app that's on your phone that you use, or your phone, your iPad device, your laptop computer that you use to capture the property, the building, the room as you go through it. And there is a web server or a Wi-Fi network that is built into the camera. You broadcast on that. It's a private connection. You navigate to a web page, the 192.168.5.1. You then establish a connection. You create a project. You assign a floor. You put on some default wall thicknesses, etc., and you capture your property as you go. Somebody just mentioned about moving the microphone closer, so I will do the best I can. Hopefully, that's a little bit better. Please thank you for the comment, and if you need me to adjust again, let me know. So the key takeaway from yesterday was that you really need to use that LiDAR only screen and align as you go. Sorry, there's somebody popping more things in here. Audio's better. Okay. I moved it about 2 inches closer. Who knew it would be so finicky? So the really key important takeaway is that you align as you go. And the LiDAR only screen on the device obviously does that for you and makes life really easy. And at the end of that process, once you capture the floors, the project, all the things done together, that kind of is the end of the survey process. And at the end of the survey process, you do have 2 options. The first option that we briefly spoke about yesterday, and we're more than happy to go into a deeper dive at any point if you want, is on the camera or on the software on the camera, you are able to compile that into a tar file and actually upload from your device. So if time is critical, the property's aligned, somebody's urgently looking to go through the data, you can produce a tar file right on your phone, or it actually gets written to the USB key, and then upload that upload the data from the tar file to your portal right on your phone. You can do that. There are obviously some deficiencies with that. It can't capture everything, but for small basic properties, it works very well. So that's kind of option 1. Option 2 is to take the folder that gets created. So if I created a property called 123 Sesame Street, on my USB key, I will have a folder called 123 Sesame Street with all of the LiDAR in it, all of my panels in it, and I'm going to take that folder and move that into the stitch process. So back to a previous slide, and I just want to kind of illustrate it. I know I'm jumping around a bit, but you notice I put this arrow here and just make that you can go from the survey process by producing the tar file on the camera you can go straight to creating an iGUIDE with that tar file. You just have to understand what you can and can't and set your expectations properly with it. So I don't want to say you can't do it. There are two options, one for basic properties, one when you need to do things a little bit differently. And that's what today's presentation is about with Stitch. So we're not going to be talking about this compiling the tar anymore. It was shown yesterday. We talked about it today. And we're going to continue on with what I call the regular Stitch process. So that's kind of an overview of day one and the survey. Just remember, switch your LiDAR mode and align as you go. I'm going to open up the question answer period for 30 seconds max. If anybody has any questions about the content covered yesterday or the review of survey so far today, because we're pivoting away from that. So the timer is on. And I'll just wait, and if there's no questions or anything, I'm going to move on into the other portion. And everybody's being shy, no questions, so everyone's now an expert surveyor. Well done, you passed the test. All right, so let's move on to the new stuff. Stitch, what is it? And again, if you're an experienced user, you have probably seen and used this before. Hopefully this is, you pick something out of this new. Stitch, what is it? It's a software tool designed to help you organize, market, and communicate your property for drafting. I think that's the best way to summarize it. Stitch is a tool for you to communicate both from, I need this drafted, I don't want this drafted. Here are some details that weren't picked up in the panos. Here are some things that I need Mr. Draftsman to draft about. So it's a way to summarize all the data, communicate the data, and then obviously use that for marketing, but it's really a communication tool and a wrap it up. Like I said, then roll it up into a software package or one file that you can upload all of that survey data, line data, pano data, communication tools, pictures, whatever it is, take all of that, bundle it up in one big ball called a tar file and upload it to the portal. The input to Stitch is the project folder on the USB drive, and we're going to go through that process. The output of this process is just another tar file. So it's, again, compiling all the information that you've done, compiling it in one spot so you can upload it. Fast. So if you use survey well, so if you do your upfront work, capturing the property, capturing the building, capturing the room, aligning the properties, your time in Stitch is very small. And I emphasize that because I don't want you to walk away for the new users thinking, oh my God, after 2 hours of surveying a property, I'm going to be somewhere else 2 hours before I can even upload it. No, if you've done your alignments well, you don't need to communicate, and you've got your panos spread out, you've got very little work to do, and you might be in there for 2 minutes. It's just a way to bundle everything together and communicate it. The other thing I wanted to point out is Stitch files get big. So I don't want you to think that at the end of this process, you've got this tiny little file and I'll just email it to you. At the end of the day, there's still, the more panels you take, the more LiDAR you have, these files get quite large. So if you are going to share them with the technical support team or upload them to the portal or do whatever, just be aware that they're way too big to be emailed, and you'd be looking at something like WeTransfer or Microsoft SharePoint or sharing on Google Drives to move these files around. So that's a very quick, high-level introduction into what is Stitch. Let's talk about the critical outcomes of Stitch. So again, the critical outcome is that it compiles all the content into a single tar file for uploading. That's its mission, that's its purpose in life. Outcome number one is to prepare the file for drafting. So you can set wall thicknesses. So if you're only scanning the interior of a building, you'd like to communicate, hey, this is a house, this is a commercial property, my exterior wall thickness is 6 inches. Put in that parameter so our drafting team knows what to draft. So set wall thicknesses. Add notes, instructions for drafting for communication, especially during updates. And we're going to spend a little bit more time on Friday about updates, which is what happens when I finished a property and then 3 months later something's changed and then I want to go update that property, whether it be updating panels or updating a floor plan. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in the management and iGUIDE management portion of that. So adding notes, and I showed a pretty basic example of those notes on the previous screen, such as stairs, space, water furnace, but that could be as simple as I scanned this room, but I don't want it drafted, or hey, most of this room is glass. Like, you can communicate whatever you need to communicate. It's just a way that when we receive the file, we're removing barriers for drafting it properly, and we reduce those iterations. So adding notes is a big one. Designating no draft floors. If you've scanned an area and for whatever reason you don't want to draft it, you can either delete it or just say remove it, or put in a note, do not draft this floor. So it's just meant to be a portal or communication tool for again, telling the draft people what you want done. And the other big one is orienting the property, or telling the drafting team how you kind of want it oriented and appear in the final iGUIDE. Again, please put any questions in there if anything is coming up. Outcome number 2 is preparing the file for presentation and marketing. Now, this marketing word here may be a little bit aligned to what you might think of a real estate photographer or preparing a tour or something, but it's just a little bit more about the presentation of how you're presenting your iGUIDE. So one of the things we will have to do in Stitch is set the initial panel, which is just a fancy way of saying is when I start my iGUIDE, what view do I want it starting at? Where do I want the person to see when they open it up the first time? So if you're dealing with a commercial property or a store or anything like that, chances are your first panel or your set initial panel is the view going into the store. So it's that simple. Is you've got to set that. And when you go through Stitch, like you open it up in the software, when you're trying to compile it into the tar file, it'll tell you you haven't set the initial panel yet. So it's one of those checkbox things you have to do. Another thing in regards to preparing is you can hide duplicate panels in the same space. And this is probably for learners one of the biggest kind of unsure why this is happening. But when we go compile a project, I'm going to go back a slide. You may see it highlight some of the red panels. And what this means is the software is telling you, hey, you scanned that room at that location multiple times, and I don't know why. The software is saying that. I don't know why. And for drafting purposes or for LiDAR purposes, it's obviously saying, thank you very much. The more data, the better. But for the aspect of the tour or walking through the property, the software is saying there's no need to have 2 white circles so close together. So based on a set radius, you're going to need to disable some of them just for that portion of it. So again, LiDAR, great, more detail for drafting. The 3D tour part, it's going to highlight and say, you need, some of these panels are too close together. So we literally just right click on the ones that it highlights and say disable in iGUIDE. So it'll still use the LiDAR data to draft, but just skip over that as part of the tour because there's another circle or scan position right beside it. So with no questions or no comments, everyone's getting this and know where I'm coming from. Okay, the last thing that I personally don't do, but I'm sure it's more important on the marketing side, is you are able to also adjust images or the panos in Stitch as well. So if you want to change color, saturation, whatever that RGB fancy marketing stuff people do, our adjustment tools are never going to be like Photoshop or anything like that, but you can tweak your photos and coloration. It will then resave it and recompile it into the project. So, and that's been in there for a long time as well. The last outcome of Stitch is to complete or repair alignments from the survey process which means if you did not align your property well or it got lost, please don't take that personal if you didn't align well. Sometimes if you're trying to scan cubicles and everything's a 6x6 square, sometimes it's impossible to align it perfectly in the survey app all the time. But this gives you your ability to reassemble those rooms, reassemble that floor, realign everything that way, and set room by room strategies or how you want things to appear and what true thing is if you got it wrong in Stitch. So can I get any feedback? Does anybody ever want to share that when they surveyed a property, it didn't align right perfectly? So Joe's asking a question, how do you add labels to Stitch? Joe, just to clarify your question, are you asking like about what I've got on the screen here with the water, the furnace, the stairs, and the staples? Is that what you're asking? Yes. I'm going to show you that bar. I'm going to go through the interface shortly, but essentially in Stitch, you'll see this notepad and paper icon. When you press it, it asks for a spot where you want to put your note. So you kind of click in the scene, click your note, type away whatever you want to type, and hit OK. So it's just that button there with the pencil and the paper, and it's pretty easy that way. But great question, and thanks for asking. Excellent. I'm going to keep going. All right. So again, this was day one survey. We can do a couple things. We're going to go out of survey and we're going to go into Stitch. And then the other process out of Stitch is to do it right from the process itself. Okay. So let's just see here for a second. I got to try and get these things off my screen so that they're not clogging things up. You can see that we leave the camera, we take it on the USB key, we stick it in our computer. We're going to open up the file folder. And whenever we open up the file in Stitch, we're going to start the application called Stitch. We're going to point to the folder. You're not looking for any specific file. You're going to click on the folder, and then that will open up in Stitch. So, oh, another question came in. When working in Stitch, is it better to copy my project folder from my USB to my computer, or can I work on the project? So I would strongly recommend you copy it to your local drive. So I always just copy it to a customer project folder. It's the same as can I copy it to my Google Drive and be running it from my Google Drive? I always recommend you copy it from your USB, you work on it locally, you compile the tar file for uploading, and then you can move it wherever you want. But we strongly recommend you don't open it from the USB key. You copy it and you work from it that way. So I hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so I'm going to go through shortly some screenshots of what the software looks like, and then we will jump right into the software and do a couple of applications. So first thing I talked about was one of the things you're going to have to do is say set initial panel. And under setting initial panel, you're just basically telling the software when somebody starts an iGUIDE, what view do they want to start with? Very basic, very easy. You just right click on that and say set as initial panel. That's one of the things you're going to have to do. So moving on to the next one, when we come across one of the red buttons, you're going to select the option that says hide in the iGUIDE. So again, that really has two applications. The prominent application is that when you've got duplicate scans in the same location, you're just going to hide one, or you literally don't want that area of a building to be shown in the iGUIDE. This is one way to manage that if you've scanned, 5,000 square foot property, and for some reason you don't want your fridge or freezer section to be shown, one of the things you can do right here is just say hide in the iGUIDE. You still have that data. It just will not be available as part of the 3D tour. And there's a couple different ways to manage that, but that's just one simple way to do it. So that hide in iGUIDE, again, is just on as you right click on a folder and go from there. So the last thing, and we are going to show this live, is there are two other major tools in here. There's only about 12 across the top. Most people only use about 5 of them. One is that when you bring in a property that's not aligned, so if you didn't follow yesterday's lessons and tips and tricks, and we're going to go through one of these, when you bring in something that's not aligned is, well, how do I align it? And there are a couple ways to do it. I think the most common way to do it is to go through scan by scan, which is I need to make sure this scan is aligned to this scan, and this scan is aligned to this scan. And while that is very repetitive, hopefully there's only a few for them to do, because the software, I think, makes it pretty easy. And I'll show you an example of that, of how we can just pan, rotate or translate and rotate a scan, move it into a closed position, and then let the software, let's call it, do that last little best fit alignment to get it in. And that best fit alignment is only as good as overlapping data. So we teach you during the survey process to make sure you have overlapping data. But if on the back end, for whatever reason, it hasn't aligned, you're really limited to how scan 1 fits to scan 2 by matching up how well they align. Is there any questions on that before we continue, or we're all good? Hopefully this is good, fresh content or a review for a lot of people. My last slide is kind of the end of the process, that when you've added notes, when you adjusted saturation images if you want, if you have your floors named, your scans named, you've got your wall thicknesses all set and everything's aligned, the last step is you obviously want to save your project, but the last step is to actually compile. And it's at this moment, and you can compile and try and compile as many times as you want. It's at this step that it will tell you if there are any errors. It's at this step that will tell you, hey, these two panels are too close together. Hey, for this floor, you didn't set a wall thickness. Hey, for this step, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of going to be a little bit iterative until you clear those messages. And then you can say, hey, once you've got everything all set properly, it will produce the tar file. So that's Stitch in a nutshell. And now why don't we go do it for real? So yeah, that's for the end. And is there any questions yet, or yeah, just say discard? We're all in a good place. Good, no questions. So I assume everyone's just waiting for the recording, eating their lunch, or bored. So I'm going to just say, let's go ahead and start Stitch. So you can download Stitch from the Go iGUIDE downloads portion of our website. I go ahead and say start Stitch, and there's no license manager, there's no USB key, it just gets installed. And the first button is let's go open up a Stitch file. And I created a project called Prep for Tuesday, and I go ahead and I open up my project. And I think, you know, the thing that I want to show you, maybe I'll open up the questions to get some feedback. How do I know if this project is aligned? How do I know that this is a valid project, or whether it's good in terms of its structure or anything like that? I know it's hard to ask since none of you actually scanned the property, but how would I determine if it's going up? No, that's a good question, Kelly. I don't know the answer to that. Do we show people apps if they don't select the entire? Oh, if you don't select the folder, you will get messages saying you did not pick on a higher enough hierarchy folder. So it's really important that you pick on the parent folder when you copy across a whole folder from your USB key. You don't want to click on zip files. You don't want to click on files underneath it or above it. You've got to click on the exact file folder level that you copied across. So all of our kind of drafting technicians, application engineers, support team, what they do when they first kind of see a property is that they obviously look at what they're seeing visually, and obviously all the blue dots are where the scan positions are. But as they kind of go through, you kind of see that there may not be a logical workflow you know, they started in the front hall, then they went into a couple different rooms, and the data seems to be kind of all over the place. I go through each one and move it around a little. Oh, so here's some feedback from a customer. I go through each one and move it around a little and see that they are aligned the best that I can. Great. So there's obviously a visual component to that, Joe. And then there's also a software tool that can help you, let's call it tweak it in or best fit it in. But it only works as well as how much overlapping data you have. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of this. So this is me in my office. And as you kind of move your cursor around, two things are happening. So I'm obviously getting this kind of radar needle in the LiDAR view. But as I move it around, you'll notice that the same line is going through the panos. So I can kind of isolate where corners of my office are. So, hey, I know I'm kind of sitting over this way. So I know which way my office is facing. And this must be the hall out here because the LiDAR did shoot through the glass there. So I have a little bit, but as Joe mentioned there, I have the ability to just highlight a scan, I can move it around, and I can rotate it around. And the reason I can do that is because I've got that pivot button highlighted. And you just need to kind of get it in the orientation that you want. And then you can, again, I know this property isn't aligned, so I can just kind of start to put the pieces. So what Joe mentioned, and I don't know if he takes this to the next step, but I obviously went here and I can kind of see there's the corner of my office, that wall there. And I know there's got to be a wall thickness in between here. So I kind of get it close by eye, as Joe just mentioned, but then I can actually say fine tune the selected scan. And what it's doing, it's taking both clouds, both LiDAR data, and fitting it and aligning the second one to the first one. So it's actually moving the one that you've currently got highlighted into the best position on the first one. And then because we didn't use survey properly, I just kind of rinse and repeat at this point. So we're not going to, you need to be on the call yesterday as to why that didn't go properly, but you'll notice I'm just now kind of have to rinse and repeat. So I bring that into position, and this is a worst case scenario where some knuckleheaded operator just randomly shot these in any order that that he tried. And this is probably the hardest one because it's a long hallway and I didn't really capture anything in between. I've just kind of got a little bit of overlap there. And then because of my little door and window data, it was able to snap that into position. So you kind of got to go through this iteratively. Now, I know this is a very simple one because it's only 9 scans, but we just wanted to kind of get the idea across that what this is like. So look at this, between scan positions 4 and scan positions 5, I'm way off. So this seems like I went from here all the way over to this back corner, and that kind of wouldn't be very smart. So I'm just going to leave that out of the way for a second. And I'm just going to painfully kind of put this. So this is kind of like a worst case scenario where you're going to go through, drag them into position, snap them around, and then get the, essentially rebuild the room and environments just because you didn't align it as you went on the back end. So another little trick is if you hover over near a scan, you can kind of press the space bar and align from there, and then kind of magnet in position. I'm just going to just move these last 2 just for the sake of my own sanity as I'm trying to do things and talk at the same time. And there we are there, kind of. I don't think that's super accurate, but that was pretty quick. Okay, a question came in. If I took proper line of sight while on site, but I had disabled auto align by mistake in survey, what would my data look like when I open Stitch? Is there a button to auto snap everything in place? I'm going to have to let Andrew answer that because I typically don't do it that way with auto align off. Andrew, maybe you could help out with that question.
Sure can, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Excellent. So if for some reason you've disabled auto align in survey, which I don't recommend you do, but perhaps you have your reasons, when you load up Stitch, it is quite likely that your data will be overlapping and kind of look something resembling a spider web. So if you want to, you can kind of throw some of the panels on top of one another just to see what that would look like. They would oftentimes also be rotated. So if you've moved the camera, let's say you've rotated it 90 degrees, 180 degrees, your panel's orientation will also be off. And so while I can't give an example of what it would look like when you open Stitch, there is the magic wand tool. So if you look on the top left there, to the left of your magnet button, if you go ahead and press that, you'll be prompted with a notification. And it's going to ask, is this panel in the correct position? Do you mind bringing that window just slightly to the center of the screen? Thank you very much. So it's going to ask you if it's in the right position. You would click yes if you believe it is, which you can use the visual and laser data to see that they overlap and that the visuals correlate. So if you click yes, it's going to grab the next piece of that puzzle and it's going to ask, is this correct? Now, this is where it's important not to click yes to all. If you have excellent line of sight, most of the time, this is going to align everything together perfectly. However, don't rely on it. You still want to individually go through it like Rob is doing. So I would say no in this instance, and you click on no there, and it's going to grab the next piece. You can click yes or no if you think these pieces align well together. And you kind of have to use your best judgment. And then if it's no, you just click no. And you just keep going through this until the notification is completely gone. And then what you'll have is something resembling a floor plan. And then those panels that are not quite placed well, they'll be off to the side once you're finished this notification process. Now, if you have perfect line of sight, you could, in theory, click yes to all. And I would say 9 times out of 10, it's going to process this perfectly, or at least near perfectly. You'll still want to manually go through them, but your floor plan will be pieced together. So now that it's finished, you'll see that there's the panels at the bottom in the center there, and then there's the panels at the top. So the system did its best using overlapping data and line of sight to put everything together, but that's more or less what would happen if you've disabled your auto align feature in survey. And if you want to use the magic wand tool in Stitch.
Cool. I learned something new. I love it.
Glad to help.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. So again, multiple ways to do that. How do I know that I have line of sight? Ooh, I think that's not just a question about line of sight. I think it's a question of when you are going through your property and looking at the screen, looking at the LiDAR on your phone or tablet, that you see you've got adequate coverage for that room. It's not necessarily thinking about line of sight. It's thinking, have I defined this room well enough? And do I have enough geometry that if I move the camera again, it can pick up pieces from where I was before when I scan new data, that it can join the two together. So it often is called line of sight, but it's really looking at, do I have enough overlapping data for it to align everything together? So great questions. If there's any more, or have them please come back in. You will notice that I've got a list and everything's kind of aligned, and or can I show an example of overlapping data? I can do it in survey, I guess, but oh, sure, let's do this. Here's an example of overlapping data. So I'm just going to click away from this. Oops. Always use Control Z. Love it.
Rob, if I could jump in real quick.
Yeah.
With regards to line of sight, one way to visualize it is if you're kind of passing a ball to someone, if they're standing, 5 feet away from you, if you're able to throw the ball and they're able to catch it, you guys are in line of sight of one another. So when you place your pano from one pano to the next, you want to be able to pass that ball in a direct, clear path. If that's a useful way to visualize it.
Yep. And here's an example where you've only got a little bit of overlapping data. So on the one scan, you've got a corner of the room, then you kind of drag that into position. Now you have that and you can align them together. So that's what we mean by overlapping data, that you've got enough of the between the two scans to have common geometry to be able to align them together. So where this gets difficult and difficult to manage really quick, and you got to have your wit about you, is what happens when you have elevation changes. That if your camera is kind of going up and down, or you've got slanted walls, or what other permutation you come up with, is you've got to be aware of the height of your LiDAR and how it's seeing everything and putting pieces of the puzzle back together. So it's really important to be looking for that line of sight or overlapping data. So once you're kind of at this point and you're happy, you've got everything. Here's another example of just using those 3 files together. You can crank through this pretty quick. I'll just quickly do that. Hopefully I answered that question about overlapping data. Yeah, I did. Okay, and to answer Joe's question, how do I go in and put in a text? So I can just say, you know, if I want to put text in, this is our lobby and it is whatever. You can put in whatever text you want to help communicate to the drafting team what you want drafted. Now, 2 other things that I mentioned before was, one of the things you always have to do is set the initial pano. Now, I don't want to, even though it doesn't have to be the first pano in your series, I'm going to actually do it as the centered pano in our lobby. So I'll just pick that one there, and I right click on it and I say set as initial pano. And what that just means is when we assemble all this together and upload it into the portal for you, this is where it copies it in. So there's the aspect of, we got to set our initial pano. And then if you ever have overlapping data, and I don't have anything that's close here, but I'll give you an example. If one of these were to turn red, and I showed you that, you simply just say hide in iGUIDE. So there's a couple different examples that you'll notice that it goes gray. So the actual pano gets hidden, but the LiDAR data is still going to be used for the geometry creation. So somebody asked a question here: is it possible to copy a panorama? Say, for example, I was shooting a very long hallway with just flat walls, and my parents were a bit too far from each other. A copy feature on Stitch will be beneficial to fill the gap. Andrew?
Short answer is no.
Okay.
You'll want to capture new data.
Okay.
So long hallway, the solution to that is to do the 2-shot mode. So when you're moving down the hallway, just you take the pano on one side and then move to the other side of the camera, take the second shot, and then continue along the hallway. You won't be in the shot that way, but you'll still collect the necessary data to have that hallway drafted. Or
worst case, put in artifacts, put in chairs, cones, tapes on the wall, something that can help you align it.
Yes.
It's the only way to really do it, unless you put, yeah, artifacts is the best way to do it. Just things that aren't too obvious. Okay, so you've set your initial panel. You have hidden the things where there's overlap. You've added notes. You've added all the LiDAR together, or aligned all the LiDAR. Make sure that you've got a valid project. You should be ready to upload this. Now I'm going to show you one thing, because I know I'm going to get barked at for one thing. It's pulling in your exterior wall thickness that you keyed in on the app. You can have multiple floors here. You can hide, you can delete, you can do everything. It's a very mature product that way, allowing you to do what you need it to do. You can hide, delete, a whole bunch of different things. But when you're done, and then we're done, and I want to emphasize, if you've aligned everything properly, you're going to be in here for a very short amount of time. But when you have aligned everything, you know, we're obviously going to do a quick little save to save all the work and realignment that we've done. And then we're just going to essentially say, I want to compile. Oh, exterior wall thickness is unusually small. Hey, we're in Canada and we make small foundations. So it was below the set normal standard of 16 centimeters. I really don't care, and it's fine. It's just going to warn you when it sees threshold numbers that you might want to pay attention to, or help us out from a drafting perspective. So what it's doing right now, as you can see, it's gathering up all of the data, and it's stitching all that data, that package together, which is why it's called Stitch. It's putting that package together, and it's dumped all of that into one file. Now, before I talk about this screen, I just want to show you that in your Windows Explorer or Mac, if you're using a Mac, where you have your property. So there's the file that I copied from my USB key. If I double click on it, you will notice that I have an export folder now. And in that export folder, I have a tar file. This is what we're going to be starting with on Thursday, this is our starting point. So we have to be able to produce this file in order for you to realistically start an iGUIDE project. So we're going to need things like a known address, what you want to order, the tar file, some basic things that you need to check off in order for you to create your iGUIDE, whether it's your first one or your 100th one. So you have to get to this point every time. And I don't want to dwell on Stitch, because if you aligned, named, put all your variables properly into the survey process, you should be in here for a matter of minutes. You put in some extra text about what you want done for the drafting team. You then compile it into a tar file, and you'll be ready for the next step. So one of the things you will notice that at the end of the compiling process, it wrote that part out to file, and you are able right from this process to say, hey, I'm ready to create an iGUIDE. And it will go from here to the iGUIDE page and then start you walking through that. We're not going to be going through that today. Today is just about getting to this point. So as a real quick summary, Stitch is something that gets installed on your computer. We load in the project file. We copy it from the USB key to the local drive. We open up that file. We do things like aligning it if necessary, adding notes, setting our initial panel, hiding things when there's duplicates, et cetera, et cetera. Again, a few minutes worth of work. We then save it, compile it, and we're ready to go and create an iGUIDE. That's kind of a real quick high-level summary. Now, this is a very basic property. Obviously, with 9 scans, it's laughable, but it really illustrates. Oh, somebody's asking, how do I leave a note to the drafting team? Can I say rewind the video 10 minutes? But there's the thing here just to add a note. So if you click in here to add a note, you can just say, hey, please don't draft this wall. I mean, it's very simple, and you can do whatever you need to do. You can change the orientation of it. You can do some fancy things that way, but this is really beneficial, and I'll plant the seed for on Friday. These notes are critical when you are updating a property. So if you've got a building where you've got 200 scans and you're really happy, and 3 months later you've gone through a renovation or you're about to do a construction project and you've just done a small portion and you want that building updated, these notes are really helpful and really recommended to help communicate to us what you want done to the property. Like, hey, I'm going to be taking this area of my project and I want you to delete these panos and replace them with the tar file that I'm uploading. These are new walls, like whatever you need to communicate what's new and what's changed. It just makes it that much easier to go through. That's the only way I know how to leave notes. There's obviously a notes field when you get to actually updating a property. But Andrew, is there anything else that I'm missing?
Yeah, so there's a great way that you can leave longer, more detailed notes. If you click on the project name, so Prep for Tuesday looks to be our project name.
Yep.
And you've got the new comment section. So here's where you can actually leave much more detailed notes. I've seen some people put, A and then make a note for A, and then B, make a note for B, C, D, and then on the floor plan itself, they'll just put a label A, B, C, D, so that when they are looking at the floor plan itself, A is referring to this note that you're now currently looking at. And so they can really create like a legend, if you will, in this section, which could be quite useful if you've got some very specific requirements.
So I just did an example there. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Exactly that, yep. And so those notes there will go directly to our drafting team.
So then if I just make it simple and do something like this and go note A,
Exactly. Yeah, I've seen people do this, and I've thought it was quite a clever way to leave those notes for the drafting team.
No, that's great. That's a great suggestion. Hey, I love when I learn something new in a webinar that I'm hosting. That's fantastic. That's cool. That's a really good idea. I didn't know that myself. That's why I'm glad you joined us. Okay, so again, a real quick review. Stitch is what we call the second part of the process. So after you've done survey, you move the file from the USB over to your local drive. You open it up at that parent level. You bring it in, you set your initial panel, you align, you add notes, you compile it all into one file. And from that tar file that I was showing you in my Windows folder, from there, you then will be, this is where we will be starting at 2 o'clock on Thursday. So just as a preview, kind of, unless any other questions come in, this has kind of been an overview of Stitch, what we call this, one of the things you have to do in order to prepare to create an iGUIDE. Tomorrow is about what we call iGUIDE economics, which is just helping people understand what they're ordering, what's included in some packages, what's not included, what are add-ons, what aren't add-ons, just so that you have an idea, because it's an important aspect of creating an iGUIDE, which is I have to know the address, I have to have a tar file, and I have to know what I'm ordering. So we're going to clarify before we go and create an iGUIDE on Thursday. What am I ordering? Is it an iGUIDE standard? Is it a premium? Is it a RateX? Do I need a drawing file, an ESX file? How do I order? How do I get my Google Maps? How do I get floor planner? So there's all these things that we do as part of our packaging. And we just kind of want to have a very simple exercise so that everybody knows what they can order or what's included in their orders. So when we go and create this test iGUIDE or project on Thursday, we've kind of checked off all of our things that we've had to do. And then we'll upload to the iGUIDE, show you some things like iGUIDE preview, how we get from there, what to expect on turnaround time, how you'll be notified, et cetera, et cetera. So that concludes my presentation. Hopefully this has been helpful to any new operators out there. We have recorded and compiled the version from yesterday. So we'll be putting the survey project, survey webinar up online later today. And we'll kind of be one day behind on all of these. But our goal is to, again, remove barriers for you using, oh, somebody asked, Joe's asking a question. From the first class, you showed a light at the bottom of your Planix. Can you talk more about that? Oh, sure, I've got 10 minutes free. I will do that right now. Sure, great question. In fact, I just recommended this to another audience down in the Caribbean. Just make sure. Can everybody see my Planix camera? Is my video on? I can't see my video. Andrew, can you see my screen?
I can see your screen, but I don't see survey at the moment.
But can you see my video?
I can see your video now, yes.
Great, that's all I was going to show. Perfect. So I believe the light at the bottom of my Planix. This is called a Halo 360. We don't make this. This is just something you can order right from the manufacturer or on Amazon. I think it's about 260 bucks, but you can see, and Kelly did a great job on our master class on accessories for all the Planix on our Planix devices, and they talked about this in detail, but I'll show you today. So this is a great accessory that I use a lot that you can see just screws into the bottom of my camera, and then it mounts to my standard tripod mount. And it's called a Halo 360 light. And when you turn it on, you basically get to choose which level of illumination you want. So if you're in dark spaces and you don't want to be pulling around floodlights or anything like that, it's a great way to, and a great tool that you should have in your toolbox to just illuminate the scene to make your life easier. So hopefully that was the question you're asking, Joe, and if not, let me know in the window. But that's a great accessory that I recommend for everybody, and you can literally go on to the our accessories page and find out more about that and order it from the vendor.
From the from a sports side, I've had nothing but praise from operators who have used that. especially in CRE and commercial units. So yes, highly recommend it.
Okay, so there was another question that came in. Yeah, that light is highly recommended. There's another question that came in about when you have scans come in close together. So I apologize, and maybe I can start there tomorrow. None of my scans in this case are close together, but I'm going to open up a different property.
You could keep the same one open if you want. Just move one of the scans on top of another. Oh, that's fine.
I'll show. So here's an example of a property where the scans were close together. And it's obvious because there's two dots that are literally side by side. You can see that on this project, we've already disabled a bunch of them, that they're in red. And again, so when you go to compile or create the tar file, you'll notice that you get messages. I hate to call them errors, but they're messages that they're saying there are scans in these locations that are too close together. How do I resolve them? So if you click on one, it jumps to where that is, and it also there. I always like to go and I can press on it in the scene, and if I just toggle back and forth with my space bar, it's highlighting, and notice how it's flicking on under my main floor between 1 and 2. Well, I can pick one of them and again say hide in the iGUIDE. So you actually get a little bit of a notification. It's showing that these two are too close together. So again, I hit my space bar, highlight, say hide in iGUIDE. Now I'm just randomly picking which one I should hide, but logic would say you go through that and say, well, this one is a better position, or this one's a better panel, this one's showing this or that, and use a little bit more logic than just me rapidly hitting my space bar. But that's what happens when you go and press compile. You'll notice I have them elsewhere in my project, so I would need to find out where. It's probably exterior or floor. There they are in the basement. I'm not going to do that now, but you can see it highlights that it won't let me compile until I decide which panels I want and which panels I don't want. So it's, again, just highlight the one you want, jump to that spot in the browser, design tree, whatever you want to call it, and hide in the iGUIDE. So yeah, it's that simple. So as a real quick summary, that's one of the main things that you will be up against. Aligning your data as we've shown, hiding the panels, setting your initial panel view, and adding notes. And don't think of Stitch bigger than that. That's what its intent is, so that when we assemble this and put it into the iGUIDE for you, the tour looks great, everything flows great, the drafters know exactly what you want, and we can turn around and deliver as per your expectations.
May I just make a quick point on this topic of enabling and disabling? If you've got 500 panels on a floor, for example, and you don't want to be going through individually, in this case, let's use the basement as an example. What I would recommend you do, if you continue to get the notification saying that panels are too close, click on the second panel, so panel 0002, holding down Shift on your keyboard and selecting the very last panel in the sequence. It'll highlight all of them at once, and you can hide all of them at the same time because you only need one panel visible. Yeah, so you can click hide, and then they'll all be hidden then. That way it allows you to save and export your project. Once it's been processed, you can enable them later on. You just want to get your data submitted for drafting as soon as possible. So to avoid any potential delays, that may be a quick way to get around that notification if you don't want to spend the time figuring out which panel is too close to another panel.
Yeah, you're going to do that at some point, right? That's a really good way to think about it. So you can enable and disable them later as well. Sometimes flexibility comes at the cost of confusion, right? You can do it in either location, but that's a great point, Andrew. Thank you.
No problem.
Is exterior an option, or do I add a layer called exterior? Well, you can see on this project, Joe, that we scan the exterior of a house, and we just treated it like we did any other property. So let me just click on them, and we went around and just shot it as normal. We just created that. We created a floor called exterior, And that way, we did it for a couple purposes. The real estate agent wanted it to show some pictures of the property, but at the same time, they wanted it to be sending out estimates for getting some work done on the outside of the property too. So you can do things like just create a layer called exterior. And what I always like to do in these examples, if I hit rename, I just make sure I put on notes like no draft. And just so that they know on that other end that there's nothing to be done other than we want the panels or the originals. Did I do it in Stitch? Did you do it? No, I did it in Survey. So when we were at the property scanning, we just created a layer called exterior, and I went around the building and just shot everything on the layer called exterior. I hope that's what you're asking. If not, let us know in that window. But that's more. Okay. All right. Well, wow, we went to 2:58. I hope everyone's enjoyed this. We've got 3 more to do this week. If there are any questions, please feel free to reach out to us or our support team. We appreciate your time and you joining us, and hopefully you're getting something out of this. As I said to Joe earlier this week, it's our job to make sure you're all superstars with our hardware, and we want you to be measuring and scanning properties at the highest possible cadence, and it means a lot for your business. So we're going to keep doing this. And again, if you have any questions about Survey or Stitch at this time, please, you can submit it. There is another one tomorrow. If anyone hasn't read or signed up for them all, tomorrow's on economics or just understanding what you're ordering and why. And then Thursday, again, creating our iGUIDE and some of the questions and things you have to answer. And then Friday is kind of like the home run day where we say all the things you can do with your iGUIDE. And hopefully we see some of you back for some of the other sessions later this week. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see some of you tomorrow, and take care. Hopefully you've enjoyed it.